G'day guys, welcome to the Pumped On Property Show. Today I'm with Adzi again.
G'day guys.
And we're actually going to have a bit of a debate today. So this is a bit of a different format, and I think we're going to be doing more and more of this just because it's heaps fun for us to just have a bit of a crack at each other.
Yeah, mix it up a little bit.
So today we're going to talk about this concept of people that actually get out there and have a crack versus people that play it safe. Now, I think you'll agree, bro, that at different times of our life, we could be either one of them. In fact, most days of the week, we could be either one of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Wake up willing to give it a crack and go to bed playing it safe.
Yeah. You know, get knocked down as you're brushing your teeth and then you get back up again. But the reality is, different parts of our lives where we have a tendency to go out there and give it a crack. Maybe you're really into your relationship, maybe you're really into travel, maybe you're really into training or investing or business or your job.
Yeah.
And you just go for broke in that part of your life, but maybe in other parts of our lives we also play it safe sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to be completely honest, we had a little take before this one and we realized that we kind of missed the mark a little bit in the fact that you can be both, and it tends to be that you'll be one way in certain aspects of your life and then the other way in other aspects of your life. And so I guess we're going to talk a little bit today about where you sit in those different aspects, and I guess, is that holding it back in some of your goals or direction on where you want to head for your life?
Now, I'm going to take the giving it a crack side of things today, and Adzi's going to take the playing it safe side. What we're really focusing on for this video or this podcast is really the financial side of your life, because you might be absolutely kicking ass. Like, I've got mates who are 6% body fat that are jacked up, that look absolutely amazing, that crush it, but are completely broke. You know what I mean? I've got mates that travel the world and do nothing but that are, you know, completely happy but completely broke. I've got other friends that run the most successful businesses but work 80 hours a week and fucking hate their life. You know what I mean? Like, what we're talking about today is just having a crack in that financial side. And at the end of the video, we're going to talk about results and the result of having a crack versus not having a crack over a longer term period of time.
Yeah. Exactly. So I guess to kick us off, I'll start off with, I guess, a little bit about the personality type of a safe sort of persona, or what we're talking about, or maybe not persona, but safe in that part of their life. So that financially side of things. So we tend to see that this safe person, they're not necessarily poor. They're not bad with their money. If anything, they're probably good with their money, just they don't use it too much. And that's what we're really trying to hit on here. So we tend to see that they'll be someone that's got a bit of savings in the bank, probably a decent amount of savings in the bank, better than like the average person would have. And they've managed to keep their living expenses quite low, I tend to find. As in, they don't want to be spending money because that means they have to make more money, and they don't want to put themselves in that position where they're having to, you know, they're responsible for boosting up their income or making more money or doing something in a different way. So they tend to keep it very, I guess, a bit more simple, earn a little bit less money, but spend less money. So they can save good with that because obviously they're still balanced. They're not overspending.
And you can think of this person playing it safe in terms of Robert Kiyosaki's book as the poor dad, in a way. You know, my dad actually is, now that I think about it, is exactly the playing it safe guy. You know what I mean? He's got a good business, but really it's just a high-paying job. Yeah. And his focus is, you know, paying off the debt on his own home and just having savings in the bank and a very low risk share portfolio in his super fund. So that's kind of the persona if you're over 40 to 50 years of age. You know, you'll have good equity in your own home, you'll be working down that debt, you're probably earning great money with great savings in your offset account, but not much more to show from that. And if you're sort of 20 to 35, 40, you're probably, you know, still renting or living at home or living in a really low cost accommodation, earning freaking awesome money and saving all of it with all sorts of dreams for what you could do with it, but, you know, nothing that you've actually done with it to date. So I actually think it's a wicked personality type and persona, like type of person. Half of my mates and my family are like this.
Yeah.
It allows you to take advantage of opportunities. Unfortunately, most of those people just don't take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's the problem with it, I guess. When you get in that state of researching everything and really, really taking care of your money, that you don't want to spend it on anything that's not the right choice, then it's quite easy to see something come up because you're so used to telling yourself, I don't spend money that way, or I'm not spending this money, I'm saving it. When that opportunity does arise, it's so easy to be able to research your way into talking yourself out of it.
Research your way into talking yourself out of it. I freaking love that.
Yeah, I didn't know if that would come out right, but it seemed to make sense.
I just didn't get it right away. But let's talk more about this persona of the playing it safe. You know, we've said great savers, generally good jobs, low overheads. Tell me more.
I find that they tend to be quite knowledgeable. Like, these people know that they don't want to just go and say blow their money on cigarettes and booze, or like, you know, the next toy, the next jet ski, whatever's in front of them, they choose to save. They are thinking long term in the way that they want to have money for the future, hence why they save so well, or hence why they're focusing on paying down their mortgage or whatever stage in life they are. They're really focusing on that immediate, I guess, financial concern. Mm-hmm. I tend to find, even though they're thinking long term, their focus is always on the short term though. So it's always on getting more savings, on paying off my credit card or paying off my home loan, and that's it. There's not like really other avenues outside that, but we'll touch on that a little bit more later. They tend to be quite comfortable people as well, so I guess it's a benefit of not taking any of those risks that someone giving it a crack might. Mm-hmm. They can feel quite comfortable. Their money's not going anywhere tomorrow. It's still going to be there when they wake up the next day. They're still going to have their job because they've worked there for a long time, or they take that very seriously because they don't want to lose that security.
Yep, and we'll talk about the drivers for that later on. But I think that wraps up that type of personality pretty well.
Yeah, I think so. There's a bit more in there, but we can touch on that as well throughout the chat. What do you think about the giving it a crack side of things? Yeah,
so the giving it a crack side of things to me is, we all know these people, they're your mates or your family members that are action orientated, but not just action orientated and looking at the big picture long term. A lot of people could say this personality type is kind of living in the clouds. I'm sure you've got that, mate, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're also very, very task orientated. A lot of these people are achievement and goal orientated as well, in the sense that they're looking to constantly do stuff, but it might not be I'm going to commit to paying myself $500 every week. It might be more, I'm just going to go figure out how to make an extra 100K this year, you know what I mean? And it's this huge lofty goal, but some reason or some way these action orientated people just pull it out of the bag.
Yeah, or like I find like it could be even their dream is just to have that extra 100,000, but because they're so action and so task orientated, they just know what the steps they need to take that creates the results. And once they've figured that on, they just latch onto that and do nothing else. Like they just just do those actions that create results and just go and go and go and go and go and go. And that's basically it from my point of view. But obviously there's a bit more behind the scenes going on.
There's not really anything more going on. Like it's very simple, as we've seen, because we do have a bunch of friends in our life that are doing stuff, and success is pretty freaking boring, you know what I mean? Like actually becoming a successful investor, business person or employee is pretty much repeating the profitable task over and over and over again, and not changing it too much, or only changing it when the first thing is still working without you doing it.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting concept that I think a lot of people on their way to actually creating financial freedom or a good business or a really high paying job don't get that. You know, it looks glossy from the outside, but on the inside it's pretty repetitive, pretty routine, pretty systematic tasks. And as you said before this, when we're talking about this, you know, person giving it a crack is very much doing orientated, in terms of they just, as you said, go and go and go. And there's a big difference between the person having a crack and the person playing it safe. And I think the person playing it safe sees changes or taking on risk as failure.
Yep.
And the person having a crack sees taking on the risk and anything that comes up is just a learning opportunity.
Yeah, and I think not necessarily failure, but potential failure, which is enough to put that fear there that it's like, oh, I don't want to fail at things.
Yeah, and you know, that's human nature, I suppose, but you know, that doing orientated, like, person that goes out there and has a crack just understands that you've got to learn through these things. And you could listen to anyone from Steve Jobs to Jay-Z to any professional athlete talk about the way that they approach going out there and achieving their dream.
Yeah.
And it is always just filled with lessons, but to them it was just a step in the right direction every part of the way. And sometimes they don't mind going backwards or sideways to go forward.
Yeah.
Where I find the person playing it safe feels like they always need to be moving forward in the little ways, otherwise it's failure. And there's a big difference there, and possibly even the biggest difference between the two.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's like massive, and that's got to get highlighted, that it is that fear, I guess, and we can talk a little bit more about that as a driver later on, but that does seem to be a major part of it, or major difference between the two. So what's a few other things that we see from that personality type, or that, I guess, mindset?
Yeah, so another huge one is that they learn how to delegate to other people, and I think they learn how to trust other people by not sweating the small stuff.
Well, I think that kind of ties a little bit back into that, the fear and confidence thing that we were talking about as well. Like, obviously, if you don't care, if you're willing to give something a crack and you don't care if you fail because it's a learning opportunity, I'm sure you'd be more willing to give that to someone else as well. So I could say to you, oh, can you go out and try and do this? I don't think I could do it well, so if you fail, who cares? Like, you've given it a good crack, just make sure you learn from it.
I was talking to this mum at school yesterday, dropping the kids off, and she's basically looking to start building a house at the moment, and it's the first time that she's built. She has renovated places before, but I was listening to the way that she was speaking, and she was already very frustrated with the builder.
Yeah.
And anyone that's built before is going to be fucking frustrated with the builder. Like, let's just get real. It can be...
It just happens.
It just happens. Stuff comes up that is outside of your control or their control most of the time.
Yeah, and there's like, because there's a lot going on with a build, and so like all the different stages, as much as you think you're completely over it, there is certain aspects where you'll both assume things, and I don't know, there needs to be a lot of communication throughout that process, and sometimes that falls down. And
she was sort of sitting there, and you know, someone who's built a lot and helped a lot of clients build, I was sitting there going, I get where you're coming from, because I completely felt that the first time round, but in terms of this giving it a crack, you know, you go through experiences and you learn from them, and there's some people that absolutely have to micromanage every single detail, and they drive themselves insane, where for some reason these people that give it a crack and that get scale because they begin to trust other people around them to do what that person is trained to do, end up getting a lot further, because there's only so far that you can go financially in isolation on your own based on what you're listening to or watching online. Yeah, well, I just look back to time. Like, you've got a limited amount of time. There's only so much you can put to get towards whatever you're focusing on in that point of time, or whatever's important to you, that, you know, like, there's always going to be a limit that you can't research anymore, or you can't do any more of what you think you need to do to be able to take that next step. So I don't know, like, I think it's really worthwhile being conscious of those time restraints. Anyone that's a parent listening to this would know that, you know, before you have your kids, you've got all of this time in the world that you don't even recognise that you have. And like, after you have children, you go, holy shit, it was easy back then. I completely didn't recognise the time that I had, or the freedom that I had, or this concept. And, you know, all of us also have that friend that every time you pick up the phone with them, how you going, mate? Yeah, not too well, mate. Like, things aren't too good. I'm super stressed out with work. And I'm like, fuck, bro, you've got one job. Yeah. You live on your own. You've got nothing going on investment-wise, project-wise. You literally go to work and you go home. You, like, don't train, don't see anyone. You know what I mean? And that person's always, like, that way. And then, you know, another characteristic of this person giving it a crack is they're probably more time poor than anybody else, but they always make the time for the things that are important to them, and whatever those values are in their life. It could be the business, it could be friends, it could be training, it could be their family, or whatever else, but they seem to prioritize time differently and show up for the important things because they get the big rocks and, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. It's really interesting you point that out, because there's a couple of things that I thought of when you were saying that. One being old saying that my dad used to always say, which is, if you want something done and you want it done quickly, give it to someone that's busy. They'll be able to fit it into their schedule to get it done quickly. Whereas if you give it to someone who's not busy and they've trained themselves to procrastinate, put things off, it's quite easy. They can fall back. So that explains itself a little bit. But
I just find it really interesting that you brought out, like, I just know looking back at myself in different times and friends I've seen as well, that you can sit in this mindset that, yeah, I'm so busy. Yeah, I don't have times to get things done, or yeah, I really want to do this, but there's just so many things that need to happen before that can start or before I can make that next step. But then you hit a point in your life that, say, I might see a friend, they might have gotten, them and their partner gotten pregnant earlier than what they expected. All of a sudden things had to speed up. And then you watch them, all of a sudden they have more time, more money, get more done in it's like a 6-month period than what they did in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And I've done the same with myself about like certain investments and things that I'll be like saying, I'm doing a lot of research, I'm putting that off, I need to do this, this and this. And then all of a sudden there'll be like a switch flick and go, no, I'm getting this done. And it's going to happen before, say, the end of the year, and give myself 2 months to do it, and it happens. Like,
I've seen it in both of our lives, bro. Like both of those two things where we both, you know, just had a real fun time for a while and then gone, oh, I want to do this, and then all of a sudden we've both switched to flick to switch, and you know, it's been switch to flick, and it's just exponentially sped it up. And then after that's done, celebrate it, enjoy it, you know, take some time to reflect, and then think about what the next thing might be a year later or whatever.
Yeah.
It's more short bursts of energy, I find, with people that are having a crack than people that are, you know, sort of playing it a bit more safe. It's consistent, heavy, marathon style energy where people that are having a crack identify something, prioritize it, put all of the attention and focus into that until they achieve it. Like your new build, like, for example, you came to me like literally a year ago and you're like, I'm going to build a home. That weekend you bought a block. 2 weeks later you've got a builder and a design and everything's sorted. 6 months later you've moved into the place, and it's kind of like, shit, that happened like really quick. But, you know, there was years and years and years of information collecting until that point to give you the confidence to go out there and smash it like that. Exactly.
And to be honest, like if I was just running around just giving everything a crack and I hadn't put a lot of time and thought into that, I don't think I would have been able to do that as quickly as what I did. It was more so that it was a realization that I'd probably been able to do that or take that step for over a year, and I just wasn't doing it for whatever reason, say waiting for that right opportunity, or just kept researching thinking that something better would come out. But yeah, it just really took that, taking that first step, everything else just snowballed, and realized I've done all the work to be able to make this happen quite easily. I just need to let it start happening.
One of my favorite quotes of all time before we get into the results, you know, because what I want to talk about is the results over a 30-year period of playing it safe versus having a little crack. But one of my favorite quotes is like, and it is from that, you know, crappy movie The Secret. I just can remember it from that, and it's like, just take that first step in faith. Once you've taken that first step, the whole staircase will show itself, but just literally take the first step. And I think the action-orientated person understands that I know where I want to be, I know what's immediately in front of me, and they don't sweat anything in between that. I only obsess about my next move, and then I know loosely where I want to be in the future, and if I find a better way to get there, I'll repivot and recalibrate. But by obsessing about that next step and doing that to the best of your ability, if you do every step along the journey to the best of your ability and do one thing at a time, you get there. Well, you get there a lot quicker than you think.
It's kind of like what Gary Vee was even saying the other week, and it was that whole, just say yes and work out all the shit around it. Like if it's something you want to do, just decide that that's what I'm going to do, and just accept that you're going to work out all the problems and challenges along the way. It might not happen as quick as you want it to, but make the decision and then just kind of start working towards it and dealing challenge after challenge.
For sure, man. Like, God, that was good.
It was good, wasn't it? So I really liked, sorry, I just wanted, before you jump on to the next bit, I just really like what you said about having faith as well. Like, I remember when we did that Tony Robbins event together, and he talked a lot about that was a key part that he sees in a lot of successful people, that whether it's a faith in because of their religious beliefs, or if it's just a general faith that things are going to work out for them, it seems to be a consistent trait across the board. And so I don't know if that's something necessary that giving it a crack people definitely have, but it's something that most people that play it safe don't have. Like, they don't have faith that things are going to work out. They more think, oh no, I don't want to do anything, I'll stay where I am because things are okay now, and think about what else could happen or what else could be out there.
It's a really interesting point, man, because people that play it safe, from my experiences, you know, like my dad, like half of my best mates, don't take enough risks or don't do enough different things outside of their comfort zone to realize that everything is going to be okay. And when you have had enough experiences over time to realize that the world's not going to fall on its head when the worst case scenario happens, or that you'll figure out a way, it gives you an underlying confidence and faith that becomes an ongoing mindset, and then like an actual connection in your brain that shit's going to be okay regardless of how it turns out.
Yeah.
And I think people that have taken on a lot of different experiences, projects, jobs, businesses, get that it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. It probably takes longer than you want it to, but it will end up working out.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, it's a huge learning opportunity and you move on. And so it builds faith that you can back yourself. And by backing yourself, it gives you the confidence to take a little bit more risk and a little bit more action to achieve a better long-term result.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
So let's talk about results of playing it safe over a 5-year period and over a 30-year period. And we haven't prepared any numbers for this. This is kind of us just throwing it out there. So, you know, if our numbers aren't spot on, don't hate on us. Don't hate. Don't hate, man.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, is it results, as in, don't get too caught up on that idea of results either. It's just more so talking about where we think that these people can end up over a 5-year and a 30-year time period. So, and
we're talking financially, guys. Like, you know, you might be the happiest person in the world that is living on Centrelink. Keep doing that, you know what I mean? Like, happiness, contentment is what it's really about. But being financially free has helped me have more of that because I've got more choices now. Yeah,
and like, it's just different people's, I guess, goals and the way they think. Like, that's something that's important to me, whereas other people don't care about that. They could have that mindset that I'm happy to work the rest of my life. Like they might have a job where they work with a couple of friends they don't mind. Right now, it seems like everything's okay and it'll play it well. And over the 5 years, they could still be in that same job with those same friends around, everything going quite smoothly. Like,
hope so.
Yeah, same. Like, I hope it works out that simply and you've got that savings in the bank, you're just working that cruisy job, you've got friends around and that's all you need. Or if you're not even working that job and you're on Centrelink and you've just got good people around and you figure out a way for that to work, and if you for whatever reason want to keep going that, like, hands off to you, keep doing what you're doing. We're not here to tell you not. It's more so the people that are thinking about these things, and that's what we're talking about as well. And we're saying playing it safe. We're not talking about the people who aren't thinking about all this stuff and are really happy and just living outside it.
Podcast either. So,
exactly.
You know, I assume that if you're listening to this, you want to improve your life and you ultimately want to be financially free within 15 years, because why the fuck not?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's easy.
Exactly. Like, if it can be done and you want something like that to happen, then we just do it. But anyway, that's getting a little bit further down. So if we talk about a 5-year time period for that person playing it safe, what's it look like at the end? I feel like they're in very much the same position. They've been able to save up some more money perhaps. What else has changed? To be honest, I can't see much changing. They could have got, I guess, increase in wage.
Or a bit of an increase in wage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe, but the same role.
Yeah. What else could happen? There's also the scenario that if you are playing it safe, that bad things can still happen. Like, you could lose your job, you could get demoted, a range of things could happen that then still sets you back the same way that they're giving it a crack people could too as well. But I guess with that idea, me personally, I know that if I was still in the same place 5 years later, that I would feel like I was in a bit of a rut. Like, but I just don't know if it's because of my mindset and the way that I think that would feel like a rut, or would these playing it safe people still feel like they're in a rut? Because
no, man, like, I think about my dad and a bunch of my best mates that are like this, and the rut is real.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a real thing that people playing it safe, like, they talk themselves out of doing anything, testing themselves or changing.
Yeah.
And it cripples your soul. I actually believe it is the most damaging thing. Like, at that Tony Robbins event, he talked about life being meaningful if you're achieving. And, you know, getting more zeros in the bank account's cool, but man, it's a hard way to do it, just saving those extra zeros, you know what I mean? Like, it's a long, hard slog. Not testing yourself, not challenging yourself is deadly to your actual self, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if that's coming across as brutal to people. You know, I've been this playing it safe guy before, and I've felt that way. I felt so constrained and constricted and frustrated. but I didn't know how to change it.
Like, I'm just thinking of a few friends that I've seen in this position, and I don't think it's so much that they don't want to move forward with these other with investments or with these other aspects of their lives. I find that they get caught up on one particular aspect, and I'm guilty of doing this myself. So say like you might have a goal health related, and that's your focus outside of your work hours that you're trying to improve. And if you don't get the results there, you then don't like put time into anything else or diversify where you're putting your time in and where you're taking your risks, because you're thinking, I just want to get this sorted. Once I've got this part of my life sorted, then I can move on to these other aspects.
Yeah, the funny thing about getting that area of your life sorted is it flows into all other areas, right?
Yeah.
Like getting your shit together with your partner, or your health, or your wealth, or your business, or your job, unconsciously gets everything else together.
Yeah.
Because it's all connected. It's not like interdisciplinary, like this exists over here in isolation and you're the same person, you know, it's the same day of the week.
True. So like if you're in that position and you're working on this one goal that you haven't had much success with, and you may have spent 5 years trying to do it, and hence why you're in this position of seeming like you're playing it safe, but really you're just letting that run on autopilot, or your finances, whilst you focus on this other aspect, would you say that, okay, change what you're doing and figure out this problem that you're focused on? Or would you say change what your focus is and perhaps focus on something else for a period?
I feel, you know, like let's talk about stories in our real lives. Like I've been through this, and so have you. Like I ran a marathon it was 8 years ago, the Melbourne Marathon, and for 6 years after that marathon, I couldn't run. And I thought, am I ever going to run again? Like I literally thought in my mind, am I ever going to run again? And it wasn't just running, it was like I couldn't train my legs properly, so I was like all out of balance and mobility wise just unbalanced, because I was training upper body but couldn't train legs properly.
Yeah.
So I look like one of those dudes, you know, that I still do. Like I train legs but it doesn't do anything. But what I realised is that I was at the point where I was literally locked in for surgery to get my patellar tendon realigned, my knee scraped out to create a space for my kneecap, because it kept maltracking and catching my fat pad on the knee. So for someone that doesn't know anything about this stuff, it's just every time my knee straightened for 6 years, it hurt effectively. Yeah. And then my patellar tendon, for anyone that's done that before, it's not like debilitating, but it's just frustrating. Yeah,
it's just there, kind of niggles at you.
Niggling there all the time. And so I'm like, I started to have children, and I'm like, visualizing myself, like I'd shut my eyes and see myself running with the kids, and I'm like, I have to fucking figure this out. If surgery's the way to figure it out, I'll do it. I'm booked in for surgery, and I go to the guy, and I've been to like the best physios in Australia. Like I've been to literally the Socceroos physio, the Wallabies soccer, like the Wallabies rugby team physio. Like I've seeked out good people, because I'm like that. I'm not going to just sit on the problem. Like I literally did daily exercises to fix it for 6 years straight. And he goes, Ben, any injury that you're carrying from 6 years ago is actually not a physical injury anymore, it's in your mind. And I went, what? Like, he's like, any injury that doesn't require surgery, like if you break your ACL in 6 years' time, it's still going to be stuffed. Yeah. Because it's a tendon and it doesn't repair. But he's like, your fat pad, your patellar tendon, he's like, you're physically carrying this injury. You've gotten used to having it, and now you have it. And it blew my mind. That was the first session. The second session is, he goes, show me what shoes you're wearing. I showed him the shoes, and he's like, these shoes are completely wrong for you. He's like, what is happening is you're on such an arch because of your orthotics plus the shoe that you're naturally maltracking. Yeah. I changed the shoes. Within 2 weeks, I was doing Pilates. Within 6 weeks, I was running like I'd never had an injury. Wow. It was insane. And I think a long way of answering like what you said, because I know you've gone through like debilitating injuries as well. Yeah. That I just kept having a crack at trying to fix it. But sometimes it is something so left field that, you know, you get to the end of the rope and it's like, okay, here's something so different that, you know, those little things, those little experiences completely reshifted my life. And I had the faith that I would heal it. And as soon as I learned how to heal it, I immediately knew I could, because I was no longer carrying the injury. Yeah. I saw myself like it was already healed. And I was catching up with Ryan from On Property last Wednesday for a walk and to shoot some videos with him, and he just finished reading this book called Born to Run. And it was like, again, sorry to like take so far off tangent, but I think health is so related to financial success.
Yeah.
And if you're healthy, you understand the day-to-day disciplines that you need to go through and the pain to actually get to where you want to be. And I think most people have had an experience listening to this where they've trained or worked out or been part of a sporting team or done something to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
But Ryan said in this book, he talked, and this is blowing my mind, like he talked about a study from Harvard where they looked at literally 20,000 people over something like 6 years across marathons, and there was a direct correlation between the injuries that people were having and the price of their shoes.
What?
And the only correlation was the more expensive the running shoe, the more injuries a person sustained in for longer. The cheaper the running shoe, the less injuries, and the length of time was rapidly reduced.
Wow.
And I was kind of like, you know, people are born to run, and people are also not supposed to wear shoes. Like Ryan said it to me the other day, he's like, your foot is an arch, and an arch is strong from pressing up. That's what gives the arch the support. As soon as you press down from the top, the arch loses its strength. And so when we're, you know, I don't want to go into the specifics of it, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just this concept of reaching out to other people and taking in new information. I think as somebody that, you know, gives it a crack, takes on that new information and can immediately apply it, or find value in what's being said, take it with a grain of salt and add that to the stories that they're telling themselves, as opposed to just doing the same story over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah, it's interesting because typically we would look at the playing it safe person and think that they were the more knowledgeable person because they would generally have more knowledge to give, but it doesn't really play out that way. They just seem that way from the outside because they're the sort of person that's more willing to pass on the information and say offer a different opinion when told a piece of information. So say when hearing that from Ben, instead of me being like, oh, I'm not going to go running without my shoes on, that's ridiculous, I'm going to still run with my shoes, I'll give a bunch of reasons that I've researched and found out inside my own head to say, no, Ben's wrong because of all these different things I've read, rather than perhaps being open to those new ideas and actually collecting more and more information. So I think as a safe person, in the short term, you tend to collect a lot more knowledge, but as someone who's giving it a crack, over a long term, you'll collect more accurate information and more usable information because you apply it and you test it yourself, and some of it might be true, some of it might not be, but more importantly, you find out what works for you and what you can apply well.
From personally speaking to literally 6,000 investors in 5 years, at least 6,000 investors now, I talk to people every single day that are at the start of the playing it safe or at the very end of playing it safe. So I talk to 22-year-olds that are just getting started that we help.
Yeah.
Once helped a 17-year-old chick buy her first property, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, then I talk to
That's
people
giving it a crack, isn't it?
That's giving it a fucking red hot crack right now, mate. And she's an absolute legend. Dating like a professional American baseball player from Australia, like just full on giving it a crack, like just manifesting cool stuff into her life.
Yeah.
Then I talk to people on the other side, like my dad, who are 55 to 60 and wanting to set up financial freedom now because they have to, because it's, okay, 5-10 years from now I'm going to be 70 and I need to sort my shit out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the whole playing it safe thing is okay when you're young because you don't see the compound effect of your daily, weekly, annual habits in terms of your financial position. But I can fast forward 30 years, the results of not giving it a crack and playing it safe for that period of time financially means you'll have some super. Now, if you know anything about shares, you'll know that every single year for the last 70 years, on average, the share price has come down by at least 10% once a year.
Yeah.
Every 3 years, according to Tony Robbins' research, the share price has dropped by 30%. About once every 7 to 14 years, the share price has dropped by over 50%. So if you're relying on your super, which is in someone else's managed fund, and the average managed fund underperforms to the bullshit, like it is absolutely ridiculous if you look at the data, and even the best companies in the world can't beat the index.
Yeah.
You will end up in a position where you run out of money before you need it and you end up on the pension. Like, that is the ultimate financial result of playing it safe, because you cannot save enough money and your boss isn't going to pay enough super to look after you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's the dire reality of playing it safe. And the problem with playing it safe up until a later stage of life, 50, 60, is you get to 50, 60, at some point you will realise that you need to have a crack, but it will be too late. And then to have a crack, you have to take on way more risk and debt than you need to at a stage of your life when short-term market trends are violent and will hurt you or make you a lot of money, but can be very violent, whereas long-term trends are a lot more forgiving. And even with all the beating of property prices or share prices going up and down, the averages long-term look upwards.
Yep.
Where if you've only got 5-10 years to play the game, you can be really, really burnt without actually knowing why.
Yeah, definitely. And because it puts pressure on you to perhaps not make the right choice that you would have done otherwise. But it also, yeah, like you said, just as far as timing goes, you're forced to work with one specific part of a cycle, and you can only do what that part of the cycle allows you to do.
Yeah, and it's cool if you luckily time the rising stage, but if you time the decline, it can be unforgiving and brutal.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
really hurt. And that's why there's, you know, as you and I have talked about, like you did some research recently or looked into someone else's research, and there's so many baby boomers that wanted to retire 10 years ago that lost 50% of their net wealth in the GFC, that have just recovered that wealth and now are starting to move to Hobart and the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast because they can finally cash out with $1 million in the bank again. Yeah,
like it's a bit basic thinking, but if you look at where the ASX 200 hit at
which is the Australian Stock Exchange.
Yep, sorry. At the in 2008, 9ish, or when the GFC hit, you can see it got up to around the 6,500 mark. Now it's then from that point in time dropped back down, like dropped massively around that 50% mark. Like Ben mentioned, happens every 10 years or so. Then from there, it started to climb back up, but we've only just hit those same levels.
Just
I think at November. Yeah, it was probably like 6 months ago, so we have hit there. It then retraced a little bit, which it always does in those situations. It's like a typical of a double top, and then it'll start to come back up again is what we would like to see. Could go back down, we don't know, but hopefully it does come back up. But what was interesting was that double top happens once you get close to that 6,500 mark again, because those people have said in their psychology that, okay, I had $1 million in my super 10 years ago, that's what I would feel comfortable retiring on, or I'm close to retiring, perhaps need a little bit more, then all of a sudden that was cut in half. So when 10 years later, you get back to that same amount, you're like, I'm not missing this opportunity again. I'm taking my money. This is what I decided was a good amount. And so for the last 10 years, you've been dwelling on that $1 million mark, or whatever that figure was that you felt like you would be comfortable to retire on. So as we approach that again, it's like, oh, now let's start retiring, let's start moving. Baby boomers, they are the largest demographic, and I think the most rich, or the richest demographic in Australia. So it is going to have a bit of an impact on property and the Australian economy as a whole. But that's a bit beyond what we're talking about today.
You know, like that's a whole nother podcast, which is cool. Like we can talk about that stuff with people, but you know, in my dad and mum's position, they lost, you know, $600,000-$700,000 10 years ago in the GFC, like a lot of other people's parents did in their super. And I've said to my dad that I believe 2019, maybe 20 is going to be a time when, you know, like without a doubt, the stock market is going to correct in a big way in the next couple of years, I believe, based on history. I'm not a stock dude, but if you know the property cycle, you know the stock cycle as well, because they feed each other. And you know, I've suggested to him that he starts seriously looking at going into cash. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. I just don't want him to lose 40%, then have to wait another 7 years to get that 40% back up just to break even again.
Yep.
His advisor, who is a stock dude, has come back to him, you know, based on my request and saying his son doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's completely fine, like legitimate, whatever. He will keep his money in there until this guy doesn't give a fuck if my dad loses 50%, because this guy is making a cut from what dad is making every year, and the more money dad has in there, the more money that this guy is getting paid. You look at the average 10-year performance, and this guy's done less than 3% per year for my dad. I'm like, how could you get 3% in such a bull market? You know what I mean? Like, these people don't know what they're doing. They'll sell you the sizzle when it's hot. You know, I looked at my super fund personally about 3 weeks ago, my return in the last 12 months was 37%, which is insane. I said, you know, I don't care about 1 year returns. I said, give me the average 10-year return in the fund, and it was 3%. And that's a more accurate prediction of the future as opposed to the short-term results. But
yeah,
you know,
so so we jumped there. We've talked a little bit about worst case scenario if you play it safe. Just to be the advocate of both sides, what's a positive situation that can come out of playing it safe over a 30-year period? How do you think it looks?
The exciting thing about playing it safe over 30 years is if you do have cash in the bank and stability, when the stock market does drop by 30% every 3 years on average, or 50% every 7 or 10, you can pick up stocks and shares at amazing prices.
Yeah.
You know, because the reality is when there's blood on the streets, guys, you should be buying, and when everybody else is buying, you should be waiting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you can strategically time your buying, you can end up exponentially better off. And same from a property perspective, you know, when other people are being forced to sell or selling because the marketplace doesn't look great, then you can take advantage of those conditions. So having cash in the bank is actually the most powerful thing.
Yeah.
But the problem with a lot of people that play it safe is they're playing safe in good times. When things get bad, they're just reaffirming this badness attachment that they've got, or story that they've got in their mind, and then they don't take advantage of the bad times like they should. Like, it's like a lot of people that play it safe have been waiting and talking to everyone about bad times for so long, but when the bad time comes, they don't take advantage of it, and it's kind of another contradiction. I knew it would happen, as opposed to shit, you know, like this is a buying opportunity that I only get once every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and I guess having that belief that it is going to go back up. Like, I know that when things do go bad and it starts to dive, and I probably shouldn't be smiling about this because it's a horrible time when that happens, but people tend to think that that's it. Oh, the bubble's burst on Australian property market. It's finally burst after 100 years. It's burst today, and things are just going to keep going down forever. And that's kind of the thought patterns that they develop, and that they tend to go, I'm finally right, because I've been saying this is going to go wrong for ages, and now it's bad. I'm finally right. I told everyone. And by the time they come around to being like, oh, perhaps I should buy some, it's already left and it started going again, and everyone's really positive about it.
I love it, man. Like, I look at the history, you know, more than most people do. And when people say to me that, you know, Sydney property prices haven't gone down in 30 years, you only have to look at the data to see that over the last 30 years, with all of the little retractions or major ones, property prices have gone down by, you know, 50% in total over that period of time. And when people say they haven't gone backwards, or that they need to go backwards massively, I laugh, because they just don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, the price in Sydney property does not currently reflect the future value of the airspace above those properties. Like, if you look at a Tokyo, or New York, or London, where that airspace is priced into the market, property prices in Sydney could be 10 times more expensive than they are.
Yeah.
As long as there is houses in Sydney within 15 kilometres of the CBD, property is cheap.
Yeah.
When there's only 20-storey buildings within 15 k's of the city, then the market will have accurately priced the future value. So don't get caught up that the average home being $1 million is expensive because it's within 20 k's of Sydney. You know, long term, that will end up looking dirt cheap, as everywhere in Sydney gets rezoned over time. Yeah,
exactly. And look, like, you can't be expected to know, like, to think this way as well if you're just a investor, or like first time investor looking to get into this. So it's really understandable to think that, okay, this is really high at the moment, I can't afford property here, they've got to come back a lot. And then when they do, it's just, that's the thing that blows my mind, is that property does correct. When it does, everyone just scatters and just goes running, and I just don't understand why they believe it so much. But anyway, that's regardless. So I just want to jump back in. So with the safe side, we've got over 5 years. It looks pretty good still. Like, they're still in the same sort of position, which isn't necessarily a bad thing over 5 years. They've got more savings in the bank. They may have had a promotion. They're heading the right way. Over 30 years, though, you're stuck in a position where you're just relying on your cash and relying on your superannuation to kind of make you get through, because you haven't taken that action to create investments or anything at that period in life where you could have used time on your side to help it along the way. But you could have a lot of cash in the bank and be in a position where you still can start giving it a crack, because you've got that cash and you're in a position to take advantage of opportunities. So to flip it to the other side, if you're someone that has been giving it a crack the whole life, what do you think that looks like at the 5 year mark?
at the 5-year mark, you've developed the number one thing that a person who's giving it a crack versus a person that doesn't give it a crack is that long-term thinking.
Yep.
So 5 years from now, you and I know exactly where we'll be. Like, let's say not exactly, but loosely.
Yep.
And that will be in a fucking way better position than we are now. Like, that is the faith that I have for both of us that we'll figure it out.
Well, financially, I think we will be in a way better position, but I'm starting to think perhaps from the outside looking in at that 5-year mark, it might not look that attractive to say the playing it safe person looking over at this giving it a crack, and they could look over and say, oh, look, this person's in millions of dollars of debt. They're working their ass off.
Yeah.
What the playing it safe person doesn't understand is that we've got a little bit more purpose perhaps, or a little bit more excitement and motivation to work our asses off. But I can definitely see at that 5-year mark things not looking really pretty, like just because of the debt levels or because of whatever reason someone playing it safe could tend to kind of latch onto.
That's actually a really good point, man, because after 5 years it doesn't look pretty because you're still building your property foundation or your share foundation, or you're still in the early stages of business before you've been able to pull yourself out of it or cut back.
Yeah.
It's a really good point. Like, it doesn't look beautiful. In fact, it can actually look quite chaotic and turbulent, and it can be hard on your mental health as well.
Yeah.
It can be hard on the relationships in your life because you're focusing, you know, I'm talking about going all in financially here.
Yeah, all in.
You know, 5 years, like I'm sort of 5 years into the business now, and it's really only in the last couple of weeks that we've been able to figure some stuff out, you know what I mean? Like, look at it a couple of weeks ago, like, it was still very much in a turbulent zone.
Yeah.
So it's a really good point. Like, it feels good because you're living on purpose and you know where you're going to be. But to the outsider or the average person, that can be, not all it's cracked up to be, and also for the person living it. But I think results-wise, within 5 years, you should have a number of high-quality assets, whatever your, flavour is. 5 years from today, if you're focusing on your career, you should be in an exponentially better position than you are now.
Yeah.
If you're started a business within 5 years, it should be quite systemised, and you should be getting key people in there that can take over big parts of your role, and that delegation should be really beginning to happen.
Yep.
There will have been a lot of lessons, and you'll have learnt from those, and you should be in a more stable position. I think you'll have a good idea of your long-term picture and how you're going to get there.
Yep.
And you'll be very, very clear about your next 12 months and what you need to do. And I think you'll have a good sense that everything is beginning to trend in the way that it's supposed to, because you've had 5 years to get some results in terms of cash flow in a business or in a job, as well as increases in value if you buy the right assets at the right time.
Yeah.
And so it's starting to feel better, but you haven't figured it out yet, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so I guess what I was talking a little bit about is looking specifically on how that person's living. It's like you don't have a lot of time, you're not financially free, or you could potentially be close to it, but you're not time free at that point. You still got a lot of commitments.
Sure.
But you touching on a few of those other aspects, it really does highlight the benefits that you have, which is by taking that action, you're starting to put yourself in a position where you're the one making decisions, not someone else making decisions for you, and how powerful that can be even over a 5-year period. So I guess that looks pretty great over a 5-year period still. The risk is on someone that giving it a crack is, you could be making the wrong decisions and taking too big of a risk, correct?
Well, if you're making all of these decisions in the last 5 years of the 18-year cycle, you can be thinking you're on the right trajectory and then really come unstuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people that understand timing and global property and share market cycles understand no one can predict the future, but you can really have a pretty good look at the past. They understand when to leverage up and when to pull back and play it a bit safer.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to be aware of that. If you're having a crack person and you don't understand the big picture cycles, but you're in business or you're exposed to it, you've got to be really, really careful there.
Yeah.
Because that can come, can bring you unstuck in a pretty big way.
Yeah, of course. So I guess that's the risk, that if you are taking those risks and if you are giving everything a crack, it might not be the right time on the economic cycle, and even might not be the time in your personal life as well. As to say, you might end up having a breakup or an issue with health in the family, your own health, which can really set you off, and you might have to gear back or change your plan. So there is risk, I guess, involved with giving it a crack. especially over the 5-year time period. But how's that look over a 30-year, or how do you think that looks over 30 years?
You know, like, if you were to just have $1 million worth of assets today in 30 years' time, and you got an average growth rate over that 30-year period, and you did nothing but just pay the debt off, you know, which is principal and interest for 30-year loan, your financial position is going to be so significantly better off from that one decision in 30 years' time. Like, you know, I don't have a compound growth calculator on me. I don't want to pull a number out of the air, but, you know, you're going to be 3 or 4 times up from where you are today financially. And that one decision, like, for example, my grandma just made that one decision 40 years ago. She bought a home on the North Shore of Sydney. That one decision now means that she's in the absolute best personal care for someone that could possibly be in with dementia at that stage of life, versus my other grandma who wasn't able to make that financial decision just to buy one property, who ended up in care where she spent the last 5 years of her life living in a room with other people, with one staff member for every 20 of them, you know, a place where they could never leave. And it was, you know, that one decision changes your life in 30 years. But if you do have a crack and work on your career in the short term, or work on your business in the short term, or invest in the short term with a long-term perspective, anything that you want today will be a reality for you in 30 years' time, and most of what you want today will be a complete reality within 10 to 15 years. Yeah,
well, I love that example, because I think that's the most simple one. It's that you could go out there, you can either purchase your home now, and then in 30 years' time, at the bare minimum, as long as you're not withdrawing it to purchase a fancy car or your new Land Cruiser.
Shit, guys. For fuck's sake.
Just don't do that.
Stop buying shit.
But within 30 years, you've paid off your home, right? So that's done. You don't no longer need to pay anyone to have somewhere where you can live, where you can stay, where it's your own, besides obviously those few other like government costs or whatever. But that seems so simple. Like, so simple. You literally just do the little few steps now, or not little, like they are pretty big steps, but make it happen that you can purchase your own home now.
I think a lot of people on the playing it safe side will purchase their own home because they are smart, you know, enough to go, I'm not going to waste all that money on rent over time. Like, a lot of people that I'd put in that box would actually be like my first grandma. The people that have a crack probably go beyond one home. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about really buying a couple of investments on top of that. And I met a guy yesterday, David Bella, absolute legend of ours. We just did a video together as well, which will be on our YouTube channel within a week.
Awesome, can't wait to check that one out.
He's 53, right? He's been working a job that he loves for a long time. Before that, he had his own business. So he started investing in property. He bought his own home. Then between 1997 and 2004, in that time where property prices doubled, he flipped a bunch of homes. Lost out on the last one, lost about 80 grand in 2004 when the market dropped massively in Sydney. But Matt was still up about 400-500k, which enabled him to pay off his own home outright really early. Since then, he's bought 4 houses, 3 in Sydney, and built granny flats on them, and then recently worked with us to buy 1 home in Brisbane and to help him construct a granny flat. He owns 4 houses, 4 granny flats. He's got no debt on his own home. He works a normal job, which he's going to start peeling back on. He's 55, in great health, epic relationship with his kids, his wife. He's had an awesome life. He's got over 100 grand a year of passive income coming in for life now. And in 10 years' time, it'll be more like 150.
Is that when the rest of he's still a little bit of debt left to clear on that one? Or
well, he's got debt to clear. He's got all this cash sitting in Super 2, which he doesn't know what to do with yet. But he'll do something with that too. It was just so interesting catching up with him because he was so cruisy, and he was definitely the having a crack guy. And he's like, my wife was a playing it safe person. And the combination of those things kept us both balanced and made sure we didn't overdo it. And to some people, Dave having gone 5 houses, 4 granny flats is extreme. Like, that's a lot more than most.
It's a lot of activity too, which is, you got to give him credit for as well. Like,
that's over a 30-year period though. So it feels very different to him than it does to look at his result now. It was really only, he bought 1 property every 7 years.
Wow.
That's all it was. Like, it was very simple. You know, and he paid off principal and interest because he did. And You know, now he's got these houses that he bought for 400 grand in Sydney with a granny flat for 100k that are worth $1.2 million each, that are renting for $800 to $1,200 a week.
Yeah.
Because he did it 15, 20 years ago when it mattered.
Yeah, took advantage of time.
The same thing in Brizzy now.
I guess it's like they what was that? What we were reading? There was an email that Simon sent out the other day, and it's talking about monopoly, and it's saying that it's about holding property, not buying property. Holding's where you make your real money, and obviously, if you time things right, you can buy property and get straight into a profit, and there is those opportunities out there. But to me personally, I really like the idea of a long-term strategy, just in the way that, if you're holding on to something for 30 years, it's just so simple. Like, I have to keep working for the next 30 years, but I'm going to probably be doing that anyway.
Oh, sure. And
so I just keep working. By the end of these 30 years, that's done. If I can add in one investment property, then I have some passive income at the end of the 30 years. If I can add two, more passive income. Like, to me, that's just, it's such a simple thing to do.
It's a no-brainer, and as expensive as property prices feel now, I can guarantee in 30 years from now, without a doubt, that they'll be 3 times more expensive than they are now.
Yeah.
Even if the marketplace shits itself in the short term or the medium term or whatever, the doomsdays, if it comes back by 50%, mark my words, the property price will be 3 times more expensive than they are now.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not saying go out there and buy that. That's certainly not financial advice. It is just basic understanding of compound growth. And I'm not trying to break records there. To do that, all we're talking about is a 4.8% increase in the value of the property per year on average for 30 years.
Yeah.
If you look at the last 30 years, it's Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane have all done about 8.5%.
Yeah.
So we're being super conservative saying that into the future.
Yeah, very conservative.
The cool thing about Dave is, like everyone, because I just constantly want to learn, and I said, if you're in my position today, what would you say to yourself? Or if you were my age now, 33, being 53, what would you say to yourself? And he said, hold on to your properties.
Mm-hmm.
And don't worry about so much when you buy. Just buy when you can afford to buy.
Yeah.
You know, he's been through a bunch of cycles. Like, as I said, his property prices have dropped by 4%. At other times, they've dropped by 15% over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
He's just like, you know, I said, when is the right time to buy? And he said, when you can afford to buy and you feel comfortable about buying, buy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're not saying buy at the top. You know, like, I would not have bought in Sydney in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't buy in Sydney till the next recession. But, you know, there's other marketplaces, as he's learnt now.
Yeah.
And there's other options as well.
Yeah, so just find that other opportunity when you're in a position to be able to afford to do so, and do it.
You know, I said to him, why did you use us? As someone who's bought, I think he's bought 15 places all up over 30 years. And he said, because Ben, when I came to Brisbane, I spent 3 months looking myself and couldn't get my head around the market to the point where I could make a decision. And so I started to look at a range of different buyer's agents, and then eventually found us. And, you know, that to me is a sign of someone who has a crack, because we have bought $350 million worth of property in Brisbane, even with all of his experiences. And he is very much a person that likes the detail and wants to be across everything.
Yeah.
He still knew that outsourcing it to a partner, like what we talked about with the running before, was the right thing for him to do to get the right result in the market. And that was huge for me to hear, because, you know, I was looking at buying in Melbourne 3 years ago, and I was, even though I was a buyer's agent and, you know, in a great position with properties, I think I bought 9 properties myself. I was still looking to outsource it, because I know that that market knowledge is just so powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And obviously, what we can see from working in the industry, you can just see the benefits that you can get from that. So we've ran through, I guess, playing it safe and having a crack, the personality types involved for both sides, and I guess some of the results that we could expect to see, the good and the bad, over a 5-year period and a 30-year period. But what I want to talk a little bit more about is the drivers behind these thought patterns, because as we've touched on throughout of it, I don't think it's quite as simple as you are someone who plays it safe or you are someone who has a crack. It's just depending on your time of life or where you are at the moment, that's just your state of mind or how you're thinking. So me personally at the moment, I'm feeling like I'm very much in a having a crack sort of mode, whereas another period of my life, say not a few years ago, I would have went through a 5-year period, which was very much playing it safe. So it can change quite easily. So I just want to talk a little bit about the drivers behind it, which to me can help people kind of realize, are these things that I'm focusing on a little bit too much, or do I need to then focus on these a little bit more if I want to start having a crack, or am I having too much of a crack and do I need to play it safe, build up my coffers a little bit more, and yeah, just manage my risk a little bit better.
It's a really good point, man. So like in terms of playing it safe, what are the drivers? And when we're talking about drivers, we're talking about the underlying values and behaviors that drive the result, I suppose. Like the results, or like you and I talked about this in another podcast, the results in people's lives are the directly linked to the way that they think, the way that they act on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis, and their value system.
Yeah.
You know, the physical results manifesting in your life are exactly just that. So when we're talking drivers, we're talking about the underlying things that create the result of someone playing it safe.
Yeah, yeah. And a few of those, like we talked about a few of the characteristics they might have. This is how do those characteristics come to be, I guess.
For sure.
So for me, playing it safe, a couple of things that I know I was doing quite a lot. One was overthinking. So that was partly coming from me, like trying to really think and really get a good understanding of everything. And if I want to drop that back, I think that comes from somewhat of a lack of confidence in myself personally, to be able to just go out there and trust that I've done the research, that I've made the right moves to be able to then take the next step. So overthinking was a massive one for me. And I think that came from over-researching. So as someone who, like, I studied engineering through uni, so I'm a very detailed orientated person, and I tend to just naturally gravitate towards the heavier details and the heavier research. But it's so easy to find more and more detailed research or more and more heavy research, that I know personally that was something that then led to the overthinking, because it was always like, oh, this one isn't quite perfect, that one isn't quite perfect. And so you get stuck in this idea that, I guess, my driver is looking for that perfection, like you've touched on earlier. It's
an interesting one, because I think a driver is this perfectionist characteristic in people that do play it safe. And I think what we've got to be careful of is, you know, Facebook figured this out 10 years ago when they started to design an algorithm around what people want to see. When a person playing it safe consumes content and research, they constantly consume things that reaffirm their worldview or value system, and that is very dangerous. Like, I get emails from people every week and I cannot stand these people. Like, I just can't stand them at all. Like, I hate the person, but it is directly every single week my worldview, my ideas around property, investing, the economy is being challenged every week. And I make sure that I keep those people in my life so that I don't have rose-colored glasses on all the time. Because it's important to understand both sides of the equation. And as we move towards a more socially orientated world online, it is dangerous to think that the content you're consuming is the way that the world is actually constructed or made up. You've got to have a balance there. You know what I mean? The shit that you're receiving from the Today Show, from a current affair, from your Facebook page, your Instagram page, is not a true reflection of the world. It is a true reflection of your worldview. And you've got to be careful there.
That's a really good point. I guess, like, 100% agree that, like, definitely with news algorithms and obviously with what Facebook's doing as well, like, it pushes back on what you're already thinking or what you're already focusing on back around to you. But it was also more than that, in the fact that I felt like everything that I was reading was great information and it all was great. It just wasn't quite perfect for me, or I needed to create some sort of synthesis of those different ideas and create my own. I'm not sure if that was something that was, I guess, built into me through university and schooling, that you've got to create your own, not just copy something that someone else done or follow a path that was already there. Or if it, like you said, it was just me being a perfectionist and overthinking things that, if it was that simple, why wouldn't everyone just go out and do it? But now I'm realizing it's the doing it part is more what's stopping people than the complexity of what they're trying to learn or achieve.
It's still simple as fuck. For anyone that plays it safe, it is that simple. It's just you've actually got to take that step. So why do you think people that play it safe have this tendency towards perfectionism and trying to understand every single part of it before they can do anything?
guess it's the idea that it comes all back to fear, really. Like, it's the only thing that I can think draws it back to, it's that fear of not succeeding or fear of things not turning out right. Yeah. Because, like I touched on before, it was a lack of confidence in certain areas, but I really think it was just fear, and I almost felt like I wanted someone to hold my hand through the process. Not because I didn't think I could do it myself, but it's just more so that having someone to sit there and say, you're doing a good job, you're on the right track.
Everything's going to be okay. In that creepy voice.
Does that make sense?
For sure. Like, you know my thoughts, man. I'm like a bit brutal with this stuff.
Hit me.
You know, like, I truly believe that we call it info overload, we call it analysis paralysis, we call it no mentor coach, we call it lack of education, lack of market knowledge, we call it fear of whatever, fear of the unknown, fear of success, fear of failure. All of it is wrapped up in confidence and faith based on a value system that we're brought up with. Like, the reality is you and I weren't brought up with wealthy parents in any way. Like, my parents and your parents achieved like great things over the course of our life, but not in those foundational ages where our blueprint was just like what our kids are going to get, which is an awesome money mindset.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody listening to this is working through that. Unless you grew up in a household where your parents were already millionaires, the reality is you probably didn't grow up with a rich dad mindset in reality, and it all comes back to fear. But the fear isn't logical in any way, because if you logically sat down and looked at where you'd be in 30 years from just buying one property or buying 100 grand of good shares, you wouldn't even think about it logically about doing it versus not doing it. You just do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So the fear is related back to our personalities, our underlying confidence, our underlying value system that we don't even know we're operating from. And I hope that's not too deep, but it's the reality. Like, there's so many things that stop people that aren't on the surface, so they're hard to see. It's everything is internal, I've found.
Yeah, like I guess I'm just instantly had that little kickback to what you were saying, and it was you hinting that it is that simple to move forward. It's just funny how now it seems that simple to me, but previously it just didn't seem that simple.
Yeah.
And I want to know, like, I would like to, don't know, like, I don't know if anyone knows, but I would like to figure out for myself why. Like, why did it seem more complicated to me then? Was it pieces of information that were missing? Or was it literally just my mindset? Because originally I thought it was the pieces of information that I was missing to clarify and keep everything clear. But the longer and longer I go down this journey, the more I think it was just the wrong mindset that I was having. Well, I was thinking about what I was missing, not what I already had. That makes sense?
Such a good point, because what was missing were the pieces of information to fill in the holes. Everybody listening to this has a hole.
Yeah.
And these podcasts and other videos allow people to fill in those holes. And once those holes get filled in, then you have to get to the root source of, okay, I understand property, I understand my strategy, I understand the logic. There's no more excuses on that surface layer.
Yeah.
So now we've got to uncover the value stuff. And the way to get through the value stuff from my experiences, and probably yours as well, is experience.
Yep.
You know, the fear is always going to be there until you start doing stuff. But once you've done stuff, like I was talking to the biggest legend of a client yesterday, Jason, and he's just gone from being so concerned and fearful about property to just so excited about his future because he gets exactly where he's going to go.
Yeah.
Like, I was also speaking to another legend of ours, Hayden, yesterday, 24. Guy's just bought his first property with his partner. He's working his guts out right now because for the first time in his life, he can completely see where he's going to be in 15 years.
Yeah.
And where he's going to be in 5 and where he's going to be in 12. And he's like a dog with a bone, like I was, or like you've been in the past, when you get an idea in your mind and all of that information layer has been clicked in.
Yep.
And then you've got a blueprint for success, which makes the values thing, and then the experiences are starting to reaffirm everything on top of that.
Yeah.
And it's just, and then he's also got the benefit of like catching up with you and I on a weekly basis. So he's getting that, instead of that, what we all get every time we talk to someone else about this that's not doing it, which is, I don't know, you know, I don't think that's a good idea, or everyone's projections based on wherever they're coming from, based on their experience or knowledge level. He's just getting that's awesome. Go for it, but maybe go for it this way. Like he's not just getting like go for it positive reaffirmation, which is dangerous. He's getting tactical stuff, which is actually making him slow down to think better, to then move forward faster in 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's a huge difference between an amateur and a pro.
Yeah, just having that, like we talked about yesterday, having that combination of strategic thinking while still being able to do all the activity and do all the activity well.
He's like, I've never worked so hard in my life, but going to work now, and he hated his job before we started working together, is a pleasure now. Because every day he's going and learning, and every single day he's getting closer to where he wants to be.
Yeah.
And he's already said to me, he's like, once I've bought my 2 first properties, Ben, and added my granny flats, he's like, I'm moving to the Sunshine Coast and I'm starting a family, and then I'll think about what happens next from there. But he knows that once he's got financial freedom figured out, he can do whatever he wants to do after that for the rest of his life, because he's going to get there, and that brings confidence. Like, you don't need to be financially free to have confidence. You can have the right plan, or you can have action that plan, and now you've just got to play the waiting game, and you'll still have the same confidence.
Yeah. So we've touched on confidence as being a major issue just then. What's like, and we've obviously went through the drivers of, say, someone playing it safe. What's the drivers look like for someone that's having a crack in that point in time? And I know with the case studies with Hayden and Dave, really starts to touch on a few of these drivers that kind of are important to them, or that they focus on, or maybe not even focus on. It just might be part of their personality and inbuilt for them. But what are a few of them that, I don't know, I guess come to mind for you?
You know, we've written down a few things, but I think there's really just 3, man. The first one is, we talked about it before, not sweating the small stuff, but it's even more than that. It's understanding what the big rocks are in your life, financially, and focusing on the big stuff. There's only a few big rocks. 1 is getting a plan in place. 2 is getting an amazing team of advisors around you, or mentors. 3 is just taking 1 small step at a time until you achieve your plan. It is really that simple, right? But we make it so much more complicated than that. And obviously, the safe side of both of our brains would immediately go, it's not that simple. It can't be that easy. There's a whole lot of stuff wrapped around that, and I get that. But it is that simple. As
an overthinker, or someone that probably spent too long of their life playing it safe, personally, one thing that I noticed, and you just touched on it then, was really, they tend, like, someone who's giving it a crack tends to make things look simple. So it's just amazing. Like, they're not trying to figure out the best solution to a problem. They're trying to figure out a solution to a problem. And so, like,
and the path of least resistance solution.
Yeah. So, like, one thing that I've noticed is sometimes you would get caught up trying to figure out a solution to a problem that, say, someone who's just more of a doer will create a solution which, you know, as someone who's overthought it, isn't a good solution because it's going to create other problems. But the surprising part is, once they've solved the first problem, then they solve the next problem, then they solve the next one, and it might take a few steps to solve all the different problems which come from it, but they get there. Like, they solve that problem, whereas an overthinker can easily get caught out trying to figure out a solution in 1 step, because that's the easiest way to think, rather than thinking 4 steps ahead, which is extremely complicated to plan out and very time intensive, whereas the doer just gets to kind of experience it and, you know, make those small changes like a boat with a rudder over time to make sure it stays in line or keeps tracking right.
It's so interesting that you say that. Like, one of my favourite things to do with my dad when I go down to Sydney is we go to this epic restaurant on the south side of Sydney called Sea Level, and have just this massive long lunch. Get on the beers.
I'm in.
Yeah. I've talked about this with you, December break. Get down there.
Yeah, okay.
Stop talking about it.
Okay.
But yeah, like, this is something that we do, and now my mates and I have started to do, like my brother and I have started to do, like, anyone that wants to have a good time, like, you've got to do this shit with us.
Yeah, the Rocks tour.
The Rocks. So the day looks like this. Like, it starts with starting lunch at 1 o'clock, getting like as many of the triple stack seafood platters as we can possibly get on the table, getting straight on the beers, and then we have a rule that we can't leave the restaurant until we get kicked out because they're serving for dinner. So we stay for as long as we possibly can. We eat all the food we can and just get on the beers and just talk about life and all the stuff, all the shit that we all talk about.
Oh, that sounds
good
epic.
Stuff, bad stuff. And then from there, we get Ubers into the Rocks and we watch the sun go down at the Opera Bar, and then we do like a little Rocks tour across those really shitty old school Irish pubs that we all love.
Shitty. Hold your tongue.
The worst the pub, for me, the better.
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing Ed Sheeran recently say, like, his favourite place to go is the worst dive pub in the world. Like, that's, like, pretty much my thing. But something my dad said at one of those lunches once, in terms of just getting it, he's like, I don't know why, Ben, but some people's brains go straight to the solution. As they're hearing the problem, they're automatically creating a solution. Naturally, they just do it.
Yep.
And that is definitely one of the natural characteristics of someone who is doing orientated. They do not waste any energy on something they can't control, or they waste a lot of energy on what they can't control, but will create a solution faster. So we've talked about this before, like my personality type is, it can be one or the other sometimes. Recently, I'd say I've been playing it safe, and so I've had a big problem recently that I've had to solve, which took me about 2 months of wasted energy to get to. Where if I was in my more action-orientated personality type before, it's so funny because I created the solution to the problem on literally the first day I had the problem.
Yeah.
It took me 2 months because I went into playing it safe mode to actually action it, and I went back to the original thought that I had in the first 30 seconds of the problem coming up.
Yeah.
And it's wherever you sit, and we all sit on both sides at different times, the quicker you get to solution orientated and you let the stories go and the busyness in your brain go and just get back into the solution.
How often does that actually happen now that you bring it up?
All the time.
When you think of a problem, like the first thing that pops into your mind is the right choice, or is the thing that you should have just went with, and you can just go around in circles, deliberate on it, and just not really have any idea, and then just end up doing that because you can't figure out anything better, and you just spend so much wasted time in between. Sorry, I didn't say much then. It was just a bit of a aha moment for me personally, because yeah, like I've thought of it before, but it's so easy to forget that your brain is actually quite smart and capable, and that first idea is usually a pretty good one, or that first solution is usually a pretty good one. Maybe not the best, but you might be 80% of the way there.
Like as investors, we tend to sit on the safe side more regularly because there's a risk associated with investing. And I think we can spend a lot of time collecting information, being scared, figuring out other stuff that we have to control, that ultimately, guys, if you're investing, you have zero control. Yeah. Like, the sooner you realize that the market goes up and down, at some point in the next 30 years, I expect to lose 50% of my value of all my properties. I just know that's going to happen, and it's part of it, but I also expect over the next 30 years to make 200% on everything that I buy today with the averages. So I know that happens, and I'm comfortable with that. There's things that you can control, which I focus on. There's things that you can't, like the stage of the market cycle is an opportunity. It is not a curse. Yeah, you know what I mean? If you prepare for that. So, and you can't control what people are going to say in the media either. Like, there's no point. Like, I find myself sometimes listening to the news or the project and getting frustrated and angry at the opinion of people on the TV screen, because to me, it just complicates an issue that shouldn't be complicated and sets people further back. So it's quite frustrating, but I shouldn't get frustrated by that because it's not something I can control. It's not something inside my circle of influence. Like, I was watching The Project the other night, which I do enjoy because I think, you know, you've got really left-wing, really right-wing people and some pretty good buffers in the middle. And I was listening to one of the political commentators who's regularly on the show. Everyone would know him. An old fellow with glasses, I'll just say that. And he is like hardcore Liberal supporter. Obviously an incredibly intelligent guy that has been in politics for a long time. He's also a savvy property investor on the side too, but he's on national television as a political commentator talking about how property prices will do this or that in Sydney. And I'm like, how does he have a forum to talk about something that he knows fucking nothing about? Yeah. And then that is sent to 2 million people's living rooms every night. And we listen to these people that actually have no idea about it because it isn't their specialty, but we take it because they're an authority like it is the truth. You know, like... Or even if it's not an authority, it's just, like, we know that you're the product of, or like the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, sort of thing. So if you're sitting there watching hours of television every night or every day, it's easy to associate their thoughts with your own thoughts and their mentality with your own mentality. Yeah, like I did a video the other day titled, "Is the Australian property market going to collapse?" And the editor of Yahoo Finance gave me a call and said, "Ben, this is the first genuine article that we've seen anyone or video put out in 12 months where someone has looked at all of the bad shit that could happen as well as all the good stuff going on and looked at a balance." She's like, "Can we rewrite it for Yahoo?" And I'm like, "Sweet, like, do you think I just couldn't believe that after 12 months of people putting shit on property, that nobody's talking about, hey, like, the economy is in the best position it's been in 10 years. Like, that this was created as a result of the government interfering to slow stuff down. Like, it was a deliberate slowdown. There's nothing actually stopping property prices doing anything at the moment except the banks being dicey pieces of shit, giving people bad loans that shouldn't have got them, and the Australian government not stepping in soon enough and controlling it because, you know, they want to keep the sizzle going, you know what I mean? Like, it's awesome that property prices are slowing down in Sydney and Melbourne right now. They can't go up by 80% and not slow down, and anyone that gets history will get that stuff.
Yeah, it's just standard. It has to happen. And
it's an opportunity. Like, the next 2 years is the best buying opportunity I reckon we'll have in the next 7. I'm taking full advantage of it. Like, it is a full-on opportunity right now, particularly in southeast Queensland if you know where to look. And yes, property prices might go down a little bit. Sweet. Like, the further they go down, the better the buying opportunity for you.
Yeah, definitely. Like, we're not trying to say that Brisbane's ran up incredibly in the last few years and that's why you should buy it.
It's grown by less than 1% a year for 10 years. It's ran down for 10 years.
It's the opposite. It's sitting low, it's sitting flat, and we're telling you that that's a buying opportunity, and because that's what we see it as now.
Yeah, that's all we'll say about that.
Okay,
sorry. I don't want to get too on like buying stuff, because some people don't want to buy. You know, that's cool. Like, wherever you're at, safe side, crack stage, you know, like, you just make your buying decisions on your own. But, you know, I suppose the other couple of things that I want to talk about is, and this is something that Tony Robbins really reaffirmed when we went and saw him recently, is success leaves clues, and people that give it a crack are not trying to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, like, I spent my 20s working for 3 very successful people, and I haven't done anything that they didn't do. I've just taken the combined knowledge from all of those people and applied it. And I think that is a huge thing that people that actually achieve something in their lives financially do. They don't try and create a new type of property. They don't try and reinvent the cycle. They don't waste energy and time looking at things that they can't control. They just figure out a strategy that's worked for other very successful people and then do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can talk about being financially free all that you want, but to actually be financially free, there's only a few things you really have to do. And every single person that I've ever talked to that is financially free has done those same things. And it's as simple as paying yourself first, investing a percentage of your money in the asset class that you understand, and then rinsing and repeating that until it becomes financial independence.
Yeah.
And there's obviously heaps of tips and tricks that you can use to speed it up, but the reality is it's that simple, and it takes a lot more time than you expect it will. You know, if you're chasing it in 12 months to 5 years, it's not going to happen for you. You'll probably end up worse off. But if you've got 10 to 15, you'll be shocked how much further ahead you can really be.
Yeah. And so for all the young guys out there and young girls, I just want to give you a little case study of myself. I spent a lot of time when I was younger, investing in shares, currency, bit of Bitcoin. I basically tried a lot of different investment avenues. I've also done property. I'm not going to have a go at any of them in particular, but what Ben was saying was massive for myself, and it was that everything that I learned, I tried to tweak to put my own twist on it. Like, I tried to create, from books I've read, they would say create an edge, or give yourself an edge on the market. So I would always try and synthesize, bring different ideas together, different strategies, different frameworks, and would try and collect different pieces. But after about 10 years of doing that, I ended up just not giving up on it. Like, I'm still investing, but I'm investing in a very passive way compared to what I was. And so I look back and I just think, knowing then I was trying to speed up the process by creating a way to invest that I could do it in a very short term, didn't work out. But if I had instead took the attitude that I've got 10 years here, which I spent doing it, what do I want at the end of this 10 years, reverse engineer it and use the time and compound growth in my favor, I would have been much, much further ahead than where I got to just chasing those immediate profits or those quick gains in the short term. So I think it's just, I guess, important to highlight that although 10 years seems like a long time, if you do 10 different things that each you focus on for a year and then move on, you can get to that 10 years very quickly and create a poor result compared to doing it in a way that's a lot less stressful. You have a lot more time on your hands and you've got a less risk approach to creating the same or if not a better result.
Yeah, and like my experience over the last 10 years is I found my passion in property at 24, which was 10 years ago, and I've done nothing but obsess about one thing. And because I've done nothing but obsess and apply on that one thing, yes, I've made massive mistakes in property, selling too early, people burning down my houses, buying in regional areas, buying units, like all the sort of stuff that I know I would never touch anymore, but you know, focused on one thing, and that has enabled me over the same 10-year period, starting from the same base, to do slightly differently financially, at least in the last 10 years, because it's just been one thing. And as my accountant says to me, I always go in there, I'm like, should I diversify? And he's like, Ben, you would be stupid to do anything else than you're doing.
Yeah. Just
keep doing exactly what you're doing because you know it and it's working. And it's hard, like when there's, you know, the kid in the candy store, you know, either when you get financially free and you get bored with what you're doing, and, you know, as humans we crave doing different stuff, or secondly, if you're just starting out and everything looks like an opportunity because you don't understand it, but the market is unforgiving for people who don't know their stuff and that don't relentlessly apply what they know, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like any market, the ASX or S&P has done 100% in 10 years. If you haven't done at least 100%, it's because you thought you knew more than just the standard market. There's people that would have done 500% in the last 10 years because you can do exponentially better than the market if you have a strategy. Definitely, and it's just taking advantage of that time and that compound growth. To be honest, that's my thoughts on it, or it's probably oversimplifying it a little bit, but it like for someone who, say, comparing our two positions, at the halfway mark, there wasn't that much difference because I was putting in a lot of work and a lot of energy to get it to where it needed to be, but so was Ben, like on both sides. The difference came over the next 5 years because I didn't keep applying that same amount of time. My method required a very active approach, which I didn't follow as diligently and didn't keep up with. I could have perhaps got the same results, but it was very, very active versus, you know, thinking long term, having that investment that compounds over time. So in those later years, that growth grows exponentially and gets much, much more powerful as you go along. And I've got friends like that I grew up with in Sydney now, like a bunch of those guys have got financially free now, and like two examples in terms of investment mindset. One of them has played it safe. He inherited $700,000, but his parents had been educating him on shares since he was like 14. I think he started to build a portfolio. He's 33 now and he's turned that 700K into like $5 million just by playing the market safely over the last 15 years. I've got another friend who started with absolutely nothing, was an accountant that moved to London, that when he was in London, the market corrected itself when he went, and he was literally got a call from his bank saying you're in $90,000 of overdraft. If you don't pay it within 24 hours, we're going to bankrupt you. Had to figure out a way to get the money in the account. The most stressful thing that ever happened, he got out of shares as a result, got into crypto, put 30 grand into crypto and has turned it into over $100 million now. Like, this is just, he took risks and he has a crack, and every single day his goal is to make 20% a day. Like, this is this crypto guy. He's like, any day of the week, Ben, I could lose it all, but I'm prepared to like go hard because I know that if I can keep doing what I've done, I'll be in this position. He's just been doing one thing for 7 or 6 years, which is the coin. And he's ended up there. Another friend who just played it safe, just played the index and bought the big blue chip stuff at the right time, and has bought the dips every single year for the last 15 years, has done exponentially well as well. But he hasn't done it in a crazy way. He's done it by just being focused, and both of these guys now don't work. One of them's just gone and become a pilot for Qantas or Virgin because he wanted to, just for something to do. He thought, I'll go fly planes. The other one just surfs all day, sits they're trading crypto and in his undies smashing beers. You know what I mean? Like, whatever your path is, like, you can achieve it, but it didn't happen for either of them overnight. For one, it's been 15 years and he was lucky to get a handout. The other one's done it in a very aggressive, very intense way.
Yeah.
You know, 5 or 6 years ago in crypto, I'd be sitting on the beach with him and he would be losing at that time $200,000 or $300,000 in a day. He had the stomach for that risk and the reward, and he just kept playing it with the strategy and got better over time. But, you know, wherever you sit, like whether it's just you want to be like my grandma and buy one property in the future to set your future up, or you do nothing, or you go full on out at it.
Yeah.
The reality is we're all going to end up somewhere. You may as well end up in the position where if you want, you can be flying the plane or in the good nursing home or sitting in your undies smoking cigarettes and smashing beers trading crypto all day. Like, whatever your thing is, and it's all different for all of us. For me, it's about chilling out with the family and training and beginning to catch up with friends more and traveling again and doing good business. You know, for you, it's completely different again. Like, I feel like you've got to have choices, and by playing it safe, you won't get the choices at a stage of life when it can have the most impact.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm sort of in between / more probably having a crack.
Yeah, like, to be honest, and as you might have picked up on throughout the video, I'm found myself for most of my life as a play it safe sort of person, and then it's been a journey since leaving school that I've been trending towards more and more of having a crack and trying to, I guess, develop the support systems within my own way of thinking to be able to maintain that, and hence why we've got down to where we did with talking about drivers, because me personally, that was a major thing for me, is figuring out what my own intrinsic drivers were, going through that process, and then comparing that to where I thought I wanted to be, or where the people doing what I wanted to do, like Ben's touched on, don't reinvent the wheel, find someone who's doing what you want to do. Then I broke down what their drivers are and just tried to find someone that fit what I was looking at, and then manipulating my drivers or growing them and trying to not use certain ones. And like meditation's great for those sort of things.
Massive.
Yeah, and can get you to that point where it's a lot about mindset, I think, and just getting your mind in the right place when you're making those decisions, when you're working. Really having your mind in the right place for as much as possible is just, it's key to have a great life.
What are your daily habits and rituals these days, now that you've realised mindset's as important? And let's face it, the stories that go around both of our heads, if we default back to, because Ads and I both sit on the playing it safe side, I would say.
Yeah, I think so, like just naturally.
Naturally, like I have to constantly, you know, work with my mind to actually do the things that I want to do.
Yep.
Because it's not a natural thing based on my blueprint. But what are the day-to-day habits and weekly rituals that you have now that allow you to stay in your logical mind as opposed to getting caught up in your old stories that don't really serve you?
One's just how I treat my morning, and everyone's probably heard this a lot listening to podcasts, gets talked a lot about from like your Tim Ferrisses, your Joe Rogans, basically everyone, but it's just treating my morning the right way. Like, to me, my morning is a period which is starting to get more and more fixed as I go along. So it's, I wake up, I don't sit on my phone, I don't lay in bed. Like, I might do that on a Sunday or with the girlfriend and just relax and have a nice day, but I don't do that on a weekday no matter what. Like, I find if I even wake up and spend 5 minutes on the phone in bed before I get up, that's an instant way for my brain.
It's a trigger for the day to go down, right?
Yeah, my brain will just not be firing as well the rest of the day, and it'll be distracted, and it doesn't focus on one task at a time as well. So that's a major one.
Oh, that's huge, bro.
Yeah.
What else?
And it's also the thought pattern that you look at your phone trying to be entertained straight away, if that makes sense, or like be interested.
External outside of yourself to kickstart your day.
Exactly. So that's a major one. I like to have a lemon water every morning. Sometimes I mix it up with different stuff, but something that feels like a little bit of a flush. So that's probably a little bit more health than mindset.
Hot water or cold?
Just tap water, cool. Just room temperature.
Yep.
And then following from that, also I like to try and get up 2 hours before I have to be anywhere, no matter what, like just to have that extra time of the morning is really helpful. And then I like to just have something to eat, usually pretty restricted at the moment, like I only will have a coffee and just a small snack. And then I like to either read or exercise.
Awesome.
Just, I find that I like to try and make my mornings something where I do a lot of my, I guess, work. that I think, like my personal work, and then of an evening or of an afternoon, that's more so time that I spend with my partner or use that time for myself and my health.
Where does meditation fit into your daily, weekly routine now?
Wherever I can fit it in. I think it's something that will have to become more fixed, but I just found that because my mornings, I like to treat it a bit more of a activity based. It might have sounded like that. Like I like to just do, fill up that morning, get a lot of the things that I want done, and a few of the maintenance tasks that you got to do, like, you know, transfer money around, check bills, all that sort of stuff. And then I would say fit in meditation wherever, but I'm starting to think I'd like to put it in the morning. I just don't really know how that fits for me at the moment.
Sure.
Meditation's more something that I do when I feel like my brain is a bit scattered or a bit not right in the right place. So it's more like not like a routine service. It's more taking it to get looked at, if that makes sense.
For sure.
But I know a lot of people talk about routine or like a routine meditative practice is better than just doing it like that. But that just seems to be what works for me.
It is powerful though. You know, like checking in with yourself and going, shit, I'm like really swinging right now. I'm just going to bring that in a little bit. You know, it's like mowing the lawn, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Just calming the mind a little bit. What about yourself? What's your mornings look like?
Well, I've got 3 kids under 6 years of age, so my morning never starts without me getting someone jumping on me and waking up. And the problem with that start to the day is it could be anywhere between 4:45 to 6:30, depending on where the kids are at.
Yep.
So that's one of the hardest things for me. Like, if I could, I would like to have a standard wake up every day at the same time, but it's not my reality. So
couldn't you just slide your wake up to 4:45?
Yeah, I could do that. I could definitely do that. I just don't like that. Like, I find if I can get out of bed between 6 and 6:30, I'm on.
Yeah.
From years of labouring and working for other people, I never functioned very well at like getting up before 6 a.m. Like, I just, even when I was surfing, like getting up at 4 every morning and stuff, I just didn't ever get used to it for some reason. I'm more of like a, you know, 6 a.m. if is ideal. But I basically have been doing these practices called diffusion, which I learned in the happiness trap, which is setting your mindset up for the day, like getting rid of the thoughts. So like on a good day when I'm doing my whole routine, I'll basically do these 10 breaths, like just filling my stomach and my lungs, and every time a thought comes into my mind, 10 deep breaths in and out, holding, I will say, you know, thinking, thank you, like acknowledge that the thought and just let it unhook itself comfortably and easily. Yep. And then from there I get up, I've got a stretching routine that I do every day because for me it just gets my body moving. Then same as you, like a heap of water at least half an hour before I eat to flush the body. Yep. I love the lemon water, but most of the time just don't have fresh lemons. So,
yeah, it's a frustrating thing to buy. I don't know why, but
they're like $22 a kilo.
Maybe that's why.
Up our way.
Just the tight ass.
But yeah, so I do that, and then I have food, have a bit of fun with the kids. Like some days it's just straight in the shower and out earlier. I always do the school drop off, so like I'm always at work by 8:30, which is cool for my routine. I find when I'm not doing the school run with the kids, it throws my start times out and my day's just less productive. Yeah. You know, what I have been trialing at the moment is just Tim Ferriss does it in his 5 morning routines that he's learned from the best people in the world, is journaling. And I start the journal with 3 things I'm grateful for. And then I do the journal, and the journal is more just a mental dump of all of that lizard brain playing it safe stuff. I'm not feeling secure today, I'm not feeling good, I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. And then by the end of writing out all the shit until there's nothing left in there in a couple of minutes, your mind I'm finding my mind starts naturally going towards the positive. Yep. Have you like, how funny is it when you read back the stuff that gets put on those papers? I've never read it back. Yeah, don't do it. It's so read it back. It's just like dribble. Yeah, it's like it's so stupid and irrational, and you just like you literally read it and just go, "Were those really the thoughts going through my brain?" Like I do something similar, but I do it before bed. Ah, cool. And that was just because, as you know, like I used to have trouble sleeping a little bit, and I just found that was a great way to get it out of my mind, and it actually did help sleep. That's cool. You know, sometimes during the day, because I run businesses and because I'm a thinker, and like the kids and stuff, and I haven't really worked on my mind before, so I've got a lot of like thoughts that go around. Some stories that I tell myself regularly. I've started to, like, throughout all day, like if I'm really worked up, do some jumping or some squats and then some breathing to just diffuse it, or I'll put thoughts, as opposed to giving them any power, I'll just put them into a category. Oh, that's the thought where I feel like the whole world's going to fall on its head, or that's the thought that I have where I scare myself about this, or that's that thought, and I kind of slide things out so that I can be mentally present.
So like you just categorize them into little shelves in the back of your mind.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's that thought that I have all the time that isn't worth thinking about right now. You know what I mean? It just goes away, and over time, less and less thoughts and less stuff comes up. I've also found recently that like sometimes drinking and sometimes eating sugar for me, or going to bed really late, or going to bed wired, can really like throw me out. And so I'm getting more and more aware of these triggers in my life that don't make me feel good. And just doing everything I can to like live my values and what makes me feel good, as opposed to what makes me feel like shit. That's been hugely helpful too. So, and then I go to bed at night, I always do this little routine of just like a little protection-y thing, and then some breaths, and I say a few things I'm grateful for, and you know, I'm just out.
Tell me about this protection routine.
Oh, it's just a thing, like, I don't really like, it's just a weird thing to talk about. But basically, I just see myself as like light, and I do this little thing that allows me to go to bed in like a really protected, positive place. So that, you know, like I wake up in a great place as well, you know what I mean? Cool. Yeah, and that's probably what I say about that.
A little going down that spirituality sort of path?
Yeah, not in this way.
Awesome. So I guess we've digressed a little bit there, but to go back to the drivers that we're talking about for the two types, I might just summarize a little bit. And I guess I feel like that really gives us the most benefit out of this chat, and kind of helps identify the areas that if we did want to start thinking about our mindset a little bit more and getting into that right place, and if it really is just that simple with playing it safe or having a crack, it's just setting yourself up right. I think the drivers is the key part to focus on here. So just to wrap it up, so we've got, in the playing it safe, what's our drivers? We're an overthinker, we would procrastinate, we would typically deal with info overload because we like to research a lot, and we tend to draw that back to a lack of confidence, or you could call it a fear of the unknown, or fear of not knowing what to do, or that fear of not being successful and making that mistake. On the other side, with giving it a crack, where the drivers are that they're more action focused, they just like to do things, do. They'll be more likely to take advice and have people around them to advise them, and also on the other side delegate things. And really they just keep it simple, right? Simple. Like they look for simpler solutions rather than to complicated solutions.
One thing that I didn't say on the doer side is it's very, or the giving it a crack side, it's action orientated at the start, but the people that I know that are like this actually say no to almost everything, and they end up becoming the more strategic thinkers, the longer term, bigger picture thinkers, because they know that every decision has a consequence in terms of time, or return on investment, or return on time. And so they only do the things that are the highest and best use. So
when we're saying giving it a crack, it's really talking about financially, and it's highlighting that also is aligned with them saying no to a lot of things that aren't financially driven. Is that?
Yeah, and doing one really good financial thing every couple of years, as opposed to running around and doing 10 different things, but none of them well.
Oh, yep, well, I'm going to start a business here, and I'm going to invest in shares, and I'm going to buy an investment property, and never really do any of them right, or give them the right amount of time that they need. And
yeah, particularly investing in property, like it takes time to figure it out properly, and so doing one great thing, I think I could have been in the same financial position now if I'd bought 3 properties. Instead, I had 11 lessons. You know what I mean? Like, and I think most investors will end up feeling like that once they get the bigger picture one day.
Yeah, once they get to the other side of it. So I guess it's really talking a little bit about, I don't know, it's kind of a tour, because we're saying that they're a doer, but we're also saying that they take calculated risks and say no to a lot of things. So there is a bit more thinking that goes behind the scenes than a typical doer. But what I want to point out at this point in time is that doesn't mean that they have those things at the start.
Definitely not. These are things that you build.
Yeah, like it's surprising as you get a bit older, you see certain people that don't look like they think through anything, and all they do is just do, like, what's the next job, let's get it done. And they'll start off being, they'd call themselves an idiot, and they'd tell everyone around them that they're an idiot, and they're not the person to be talking to about that stuff because they don't want to waste their time thinking on it, or they don't think they're capable of it. But what happens over time, and like we've talked about with compounding, once you get to 10 years to 20 years of just doing things, you get really good at saying no to the right things, like you said, and to thinking strategically at the right time, and to taking, and to, I guess, weighing up the risks and weighing up the situation in the there and the now of whether or not you're going to do that action.
For sure.
So that's where those other aspects come from, I think. And I guess talking about, if you really want to start down that path of doing more and giving things a crack, try and start thinking about those first few, which is just doing things, trying to find a simple solution, and listening to others, really.
Yeah, it's that simple. Just realise it's which either side of the fence you sit on, and at some days we sit on both. But generally over time, like, we see the result of people's dominant pattern, whether it's doing stuff and giving it a crack, or actually sitting on the sidelines and just, you know, saving your way there. You know, it eventually catches up with you either way, and everyone around you will see what you naturally are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you can change. Like, we've both evolved so much. In 5 years' time, we'll evolve more. And I think just recognising that, you know, if you're more one-way inclined, it doesn't stop you having to take action. And if all you do is take action, you know, there's also some thinking and some strategy that can be really valuable on this side too, and playing it a bit safer so that you don't come down when, you know, the tide goes out type thing, as Warren Buffett says. So yeah, really enjoyed this. If you guys have enjoyed it too, be epic if you could just put a 5-star review at the bottom of our podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. If you haven't already liked us, jump over to Facebook as well and check out Pumped on Property. We just produce all types of content. The podcast is long format, the videos are a lot shorter, and the Facebook stuff is just like really cool 30-second to 1-minute daily tips where we just share like our thoughts on stuff. So really appreciate your time and attention, and I just really, as always, just wish you guys all the best with what you're doing. Just remember that you're gonna be old one day, and that, you know, the reality is you're gonna get to this position where you're gonna want more choices in your life than you have today. And the sooner you can bring those choices forward for making smart investment decisions, the better off you'll end up being. Regardless of if your investment is business, shares, property, commodities, crypto, something else. Specialize, create a plan, stick to the plan, learn from it as you apply, and hang out with people that are already there. Like, stop taking your advice from people that aren't there, or if you're taking advice from people that are on the way, like, enjoy that journey with them. Don't just think that 15 years from now it's all going to turn and change, because, you know, I would hate for you to get there and realise that you've wasted 15 years doing stuff, which is honestly where I thought I could have been if I kept on the same trajectories as I've been on the last 5 years. And I just don't want people to get there and think it's going to be something magical, when the journey is what's magical, and that's where the fun is.
Definitely. I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's one of those secrets to life. You've just got to enjoy every day, or otherwise you're not going to enjoy the future either. You just, you know, like, it's something you got to practice doing. So I guess to wrap it up, just wanted to say thanks, guys, for tuning in. And if you do have any topics or any questions or anything, just feel free to hit us up. We'd love some extra content to talk about. So look forward to catching up next time, and tune in again. Thanks.